In DXperience 2011 Volume 1, we'll be including gauges for Silverlight and WPF. This video is going to show you how to get started with DXGauges by building a gauge that looks like a clock. We're going to explore the circular gauge and some of its associated components. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is go to the toolbox and open the Visualizations node and drag a circular gauge control onto our grid. You'll notice that there is nothing on the canvas. This is by default. We're going to design our clock from the ground up. In the property grid, scroll down to Scale and click the ellipses. Use the Add button to add an arc scale. This is the base level visual component of a gauge. To make this look like a clock, we're going to adjust the values for our scale. I'm going to set the end value to 12, and we'll leave the start value as 0. Now we have the beginnings of our clock. We have numbers and tick marks, but you'll notice that they don't go in a complete circle. Let's adjust that. Go to Scale again and click the ellipses to open the property editor. Go to the Presentation group. Change the end angle to 270. This is in degrees since we're working with a circular gauge. And then change the start angle to -90. Now I'm going to change the major interval count to 12. This will put our major tick marks in the hour positions of a clock. Now we have something that more closely resembles a clock. You'll notice at the top that the 0 and the 12 are overlapping. We're going to resolve that by not showing the first value on our gauge. Go into the Scale Property Editor, and in the Presentation group, click the drop-down for Label options and choose Arc Scale Label options and uncheck the Show First checkbox. You'll notice that where we had an overlapping 0 and 12, we now just have the 12, looking like a normal clock. Now we're going to work on the styling of this to give it a more contemporary look. Go back into the Scale Property Editor. Go to the Elements group, click the Layer Ellipses, and add an arc scale layer. Okay, back to the canvas. Now we have a clock with a basic circular outline. We're going to use one of the built-in models to adjust the look and feel of the clock. Click the Models drop-down and choose Circular Red Clock Model. This little red circle in the middle of the clock is a spindle, and it's there to cover the ends of the needles placed on our clock. Also notice we now have a nice red frame. Go back into the Scale Property Editor, go to the Elements group, click the Needles Ellipses, next click Add. This is going to be our hour hand. Now, we're going to set the time to 3 o'clock, so set the value to 3. Add another needle, this is going to be our minute hand, and since we're setting to 3 o'clock, we're going to set the value of our minute hand to 12. Note here that our clock hands are different lengths. Because we used the circular red clock model and the default needles, it assumed the default look of a clock. Now we're going to expand our basic clock to include a marker for an alarm and then a range bar to show how many hours until we have to wake up. Let's start with the alarm marker. Go back into the Scale Property Editor, go to the Elements group, click the marker ellipses, and in the Data group, change the value to 7. This new triangle on the edge is our alarm marker. Let's add the range bar that will show our remaining sleep time. Go back into the Scale Property Editor. Next, click on the range bar ellipses. In the Data group, we're going to adjust the anchor value and set it to 3. And set the value to 7. Now we have a range that shows us how much time we have left to sleep. Lastly, we're going to add some ranges around the ticks to highlight parts of the day. You could use something like this to highlight sleep hours, work hours, or any other time frame. Let's go back into the Scale Property Editor. Go to the Elements group. Click the Range Ellipses. We are going to add 3 arc scale ranges. In the first, we'll set the end to 4 and the start to 0. In the second, we'll set the end to 8 and the start to 4. And in the last one, we'll set the end to 12 and the start to 8. Now you see, just like the needles, it has made some assumptions, which are completely overridable, and we have a different color for each of our ranges. The last thing to do is build. And then run our application to see the results. and you see our completed clock using needles, markers, range bars, and ranges. Thanks for watching, and of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress.